Yeah, so what I want to say about that is that even like the basic social interaction, like basic communication, is very flimsy. I mean, if you are inserting things, people suggesting all the time, that is not helping someone. If someone cannot come to their own conclusions or come to their own thinking, start up their own reasoning, start up their own understanding, then you are simply manipulating someone. That is all, and that is antisocial, and it is a form of manipulation. So that basic social respect, that basic social and communication is very limited, is very minimal,
Yeah,
and
yeah, no, it's
sometimes
true. That's
outright
important.
broken. Yeah.
That's important that you say that. I remember this is I just remembered that actually. In my early years in Destiny, there was a Destiny member who was a regular participant, and she lived in the same city, same Canadian city that I was living in at the time. And I remember I was very young. I think I was like 18 or something. I just messaged her privately and I said, "Hey, would you like to meet up?" Right? Inviting her to meet up and have a normal conversation, like a normal chat. I even imagined that I could have a friend or something that would be, Estonian, right? That'd be so cool to have a friend. And she very much again with this I think now I see it. I didn't like the way she responded, and since then um I never really liked this person because of the way she ignored my request, and she would just respond to me when it came to giving me perspective. Again, they are very willing, and this would be the pattern I found for many years. They're very willing to criticize you online and give you like a recipe for how to change and whatever. But the moment it comes to real meeting, like real interaction, real just human normal interactions, it will be, they will normally decline or ignore your request. In the case of this particular woman, she read the message where I invited her to meet in person, but she ignored it and she just addressed the points where she would again give me a prescription and like a list of, they call it support, right? Support points on whatever issues on my mind, that advice on how to work with issues in my mind and my life. So like life coaching. So and again, this made me in some ways sense that there was this hierarchy or elitism. I had a feeling of that because a few months after that, she would post photos of her hanging out very friendly with some members that were more core members, and just posting photos of their interactions, talking about how being, supporting each other in this process, blah blah blah. But in my invitation was just completely ignored and treated me with this very, with the attitude was condescending in how she just ignored that friendly request. I wasn't some weirdo trying to, I wasn't a weirdo or anything. I was just like a normal girl trying to maybe go out for a coffee. That's all. um
Yeah. So she doesn't respond to you, but she does give you all kinds of advice, right? Right. So like
exactly.
there's a level of communication that is completely unequal, and it's also like she's not even acknowledging you, right?
Exactly.
She's
Yeah,
just
like I'm not
treating you as
important. I did feel that like I'm not important at all. I'm not an important Destiny member. But then a few months later, she just shared these photos with all these core members and this awesomeness of changing the world together. But she ignored me, but changing the world together with those core members for sure.
yeah.
um, they had like I think a meetup in the US at the time or something like that with many members and photos and all of that. So at the time, I already started to have a sense of that, of the elitism. And part of it actually, when I tell my story with TechnoTutor, some of that actually drew me to that other TechnoTutor faction, where I felt that TechnoTutor people were more friendly and, but that was, again, they were salespeople. I didn't realize that. They were there to be, of course, they would be friendly. They want me to buy into their whole scheme and put my thousands of dollars or dedicate my life to it. They were selling me something. It was one of the aspects of why I started to not feel totally okay with the main Destiny group. At the time already, I was early on.
Mhm.
And going back to what this distributor sent me, and he mentioned this point of the policing mechanism and the sharing of self-forgiveness publicly. I think this is such an important aspect of how the cult overall operates, whether it's, Destiny, TechnoTutor, self-perfected, any, just all branches of Destiny, involves some level of this public sharing. Um, and and it's important because it's very easy to control and manipulate people when they are constantly sharing their most personal and even their private experiences publicly, and not knowing who is reading and how your personal information could potentially be used or exploited, who
Yeah,
by the group, or by
yeah,
the leaders of the groups or the groups that
yeah,
form it. So
yeah,
yeah, you have a comment about that?
yeah. Because it's not. Yeah, that policing thing. I have a comment about that. Is that not only that there is a kind of hierarchy or kind of structure in the way that some have more understanding, right, or further in their process or whatever. So there is like inequality in
Yes.
effect, basically there, and
Well, you know
yeah.
what? Just sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to forget this point. There's a major hypocrisy because this happens. I saw this in TechnoTutor and Destiny as well, but just overall the cult as it operates. They would claim that initially, actually, before TechnoTutor created this group called Self Perfected, they had a group on Facebook called Self Leaders, and it's very easy when you tell people, no, you're your own self leader. There's no leaders in the group. But then it's a very easy way for the actual leaders to not take responsibility when situations emerge where they are or can be held responsible for how things are mismanaged, or things that are done wrong by them or the group. They would very easily say, well, no, everybody's doing their process. And this happens in Destiny overall, right? When people from the core group, of Destiny members, have done things that are very, publicly have done very wrong things, or misbehaved or don't whatever, people would usually say that, hey, everybody's in their process, there's no leaders, everybody's equal, right? But when it comes to them pointing out things to you, then all of a sudden there's some level of hierarchy here, there's some level of authority. So it's when it comes to facing responsibility, which they always talk about responsibility, then that in that case very easily take the door out from from facing those points that they're being held responsible for, by saying they're all just walking their process. There's no leaders. We're all in this together. But
Mhm.
that's not actually
Yeah,
how it works in
yeah, and
practice.
obscuring what's right and wrong, right? So because
Oh
that's
yeah,
now
that's
some
which is
vague thing.
typical of cults, right? Everything is relative. There's not exactly a right and wrong. Everything
Yeah,
is in their everybody's in their process. Judgment is like just of the
yeah.
mind.
So I'll finish the point I made about policing, which is that the initial message and ideology is mythic, is obscure, is fake in itself. And so the claim of some, like, we understand it correctly, and we and some misuse or misunderstand the message, and that is the problem. No, because it's obscure in the first place. You can't blame people for not understanding something that isn't clear in the first place, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is some of the thing that I see in some members. They're kind of uh, basically like squirming around, like, oh, just kind of blaming the followers, or not
For their
correctly understanding the message.
misunderstanding. Yeah.
And
Yeah, we
it's
talked about this
and it's like
yesterday.
that's the opposite of taking responsibility and being self-honest. That it's
Right,
exact
right.
opposite of what you preach. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I did demand explanations in my last year when I was leaving the cult. And leaving the cult is not a decision you just made from one day to the next. It takes a process where you start to detach yourself from it, you question. And I did demand explanations from some of these so-called leaders that don't want to admit they're leaders so that they are not held responsible for real. But when I would demand some explanations, many times it would just be put on me, the responsibility, or very indirectly, just I wouldn't receive real explanations, but indirectly pointing at my reactions, making it about me reacting, and I have to focus on myself because that's what the process is. So it's a very easy by doing that, it's very easy to also avoid questions, right? Because then you can easily say that this process is all about just yourself. It's nothing to do, there's no such thing as hierarchy or institution or cult or core members managing things who can be held responsible for things. No, everybody's just doing the same thing at the same level. So, but
Yeah,
that's not the case.
and referring to some vague process, like that's just completely, yeah, it is individual, so it can be anything, right? You cannot shove everything under all your process and talk all you want, but it's not really clearly defined. It's just an individual thing, and yeah, I mean that's not an explanation. That's not giving you any answers or anything like
Yeah.
that. It doesn't even have to do with anything if you are challenging or asking about serious questions, real questions about the group, about the ideas, then you're still being referred to like yourself, and where's the self honesty.
Or the blogs. Just read the blogs as if they're clear on their own and you don't need real clarifications. But after
Yeah, so
Bernard died, it was also very easy to just leave it as it is, sort of close the gate of questions, because now he was dead. All he did was just leave this for us, and all we had to do is supposedly focus on ourselves. And like there was this core longtime member who was close to Bernard, who told me, like you said, who in some ways blamed the members or the community for not understanding the message of Bernard and not applying it properly. So blaming the situations that were emerging in Destiny. So after Bernard died, there were many issues where members would there were many sort of, some people broke down mentally publicly on Facebook, other people got into major conflicts, or there was a legal fight around TechnoTutor and the farm. There were all sorts of issues after Bernard died, and the community began to fragment. And this member told me that it's because people don't know or cannot grasp Bernard's words properly, and this is just like it's like Bernard is innocent and Destiny has nothing to do. It's the problem is people and how they apply this and understand this.
yeah, yeah,
And but they don't want
yeah,
to admit there's patterns, that there's actually patterns of how people, of consequences that this cult creates in people's lives that are harmful, that they don't want to talk about this because ultimately
right,
they'll always lead it to just individual choices. Like the fault of how people interpret this, it's not Bernard or the portal. That's just like this holy thing that is just I like is just what it is. It's truth.
right.
Everything else is
So
just people distorting it. Yeah.
right. So, but also making that point, saying, okay, it's not properly understood, but failing to communicate what it is then that is the message, right? So
Mm.
not taking that action, which is the responsibility then to actually communicate that. And I don't see anything of that. So it is based on a belief like, oh no, this is the wrong way, but failing to communicate like the right way. So that is kind of like a very, it's a belief in a very obscure and vague mystification process that Bernard was doing, where there is no clear answer, there is no clear message. It is all a very vague and obscure teaching and ideology,
Yes.
and there's nothing clear about it, and that is the problem itself, and not some people that misunderstand it. There's a reason why so many misunderstand, because it's not clear, and it's because it's fake, obscure. It's based on all kinds of different things mixed together. They take words from other teachings and other things without referring to those. They're just claiming things for themselves, and they say, okay, this is the way, the valid way, our way, and at the same time claiming that they don't have any beliefs, right? But they do, and so that kind of stuff is very contradictory every time. Let me to kind of break this up a little bit, tell you a story about just a regular day on the Destiny farm, right?
Yeah, go on.
So I woke up, and usually in the mornings we did the horses, right? The horses need constant care, and they get up very early. Horses
Oh,
wake
the
up with the
horses. Okay, yeah.
morning light. And so when I got up, I went to where the coffee machine was to get a coffee. And I look and I see Bernard sitting behind the computer, and he was doing this kind of this gambling thing on the computer. And on itself, I mean, if I'm at work or a colleague is playing a gambling thing, whatever, do your thing, right? But you have to realize that Bernard had a huge history of gambling and drinking, right? So, being then in a cult and having all this stuff with Destiny, and then, sitting behind the computer, you know, doing slot machines, kind of like
Hmm.
weird to me. And I looked at the screen, and he saw me looking at the screen, and he looked at me, and he kind of distracted me with some other comment. And I didn't say much about it. In the most cases, I never really challenged directly what someone did, and that was also what in general was frowned upon within Destiny, to criticize people what they did, or like
Yes,
what we
right.
discussed. So but yeah, it's interesting to say something like that. And Bernard said at one point, like, in my life, I drank a lot and my body is fucked, and it's because of the alcohol. Now, you did that to your body. You had destructive behavior, not the alcohol, you. So that is something that I
Hmm.
really think about, or thought about afterwards. Like, what someone that preaches self honesty, self responsibility, all this stuff, and says something like that, like just throws that out there, and
Right.
this whole rant on alcohol, and that it, all this kind of stuff, and it's not the alcohol, it's you. Yeah, your destructive behavior, and you're using your substance abuse problem. That is the problem, and it's a clear, like, practical example how when it comes to actual practice of a lot of these concepts, it's undone. And that's, to me, also what it's about. I mean, you can have all kinds of principles and ideas, and that look good at the first sight, but when you don't actually do that in real time, then what's the point? What is the point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such an important point. And if it wasn't for you telling me these stories, because I left. I was always, for my 10 years of involvement with Destiny, I was never a core member. I was never at the farm, but I was always there. I think people knew my name, and I participated online, and I was very young as well, so I didn't have much of an adult perspective then. But if you didn't tell me these things about Bernard's gambling or alcoholism, I wouldn't know. My idea was Bernard was just such a naive idea of Bernard as an almost holy man. Yeah, sure, he did mistakes and whatever, but I wouldn't expect that at that point, for example, when he was already welcoming people in the farm and, well, inviting them and all of that, and doing the whole process and training, that he would be doing gambling. And that's very telling. And this is something that is also just the pattern, that there's almost like a double life. There's a hypocrisy, there's a double face. On the one hand, you will hear a lot of these members, and this is something I discovered very late after so many bad experiences. I came to realize For example, how some of these men that in Destiny are talking, oh, forgiveness about pornography addiction and the dangers of pornography or addiction in general. They talk as if they can correct other people or shame other people about their addictions, or like if they have really overcome all of these issues themselves. I later discovered that some men in within Destiny actually were particularly deviant in some of their sexual behaviors, or would do inappropriate things. As a young woman, I did experience certain events that were just very unpleasant, where men making very vulgar sexual comments, inappropriate comments that really showed these men were almost, like I said, leading this sort of double lives. On the one hand, this self-forgiveness all day long on Facebook, and ending abusing the world, and the harms of pornography and all of that. But in private conversations, they would approach me with these very offensive sexual comments. And this is an example of many that I could have of how people talk about or present this online persona of integrity, values, or whatever, these holy, very sanctimonious personalities. But then on the other hand, these issues are mostly just suppressed and very present in their personality or in their private lives. There's stories, there's certainly stories, rumors, things I cannot also fully, attest to, that I've heard of. For instance, a prominent member, this is a rumor that I heard from multiple members, of this member placing, hiding like secret cameras in the farm and recording people while they were getting undressed, or just in their in bedrooms. He would place cameras and record people either, in their privacy having sex or whatever.
Areas, yeah. Yeah, I heard
So
that too.
it's
Yeah.
stories like this, that people that as a naive, very, very naive participant in Destiny for many years, I wouldn't, it wouldn't cross my mind that a person who's posting all day long about Destiny and about all and self-forgiveness would at the same time be doing this kind of things. And especially if you're managing this group and even training other people and giving, like mental health sort of counsel. But this is just ultimately, once I went through my period of outrage, and I thought it was unbelievable, the things I started to realize about these members. After a while, I just learned that this is very typical of cults. It's just the thing, like just the double standards, the double face, the hypocrisy, the the the, the abuse going on behind the scenes, and the facade
Yeah.
of sanctimoniousness. That's just a typical thing. It's well, like welcome to the world. I guess I learned this is how many groups operate.
Uh-huh. Let
And
me
yeah.
let me interject a little bit of story there as well of the farm, where I was with a woman there, relationship, and she at some point went to the portal to Sunette, right? Sunette Spies, and to talk to my higher self, because I don't know, she was curious. I don't know how it was going, or I don't know even. So she clearly thought Sunette saw her as some authority, right, to go to. And, all right, and Sunette did it. So she channeled or portaled, whatever. It's the same thing basically. Higher self, and well, there wasn't much going on, but it's not the point. So the thing is that Sunette at that point, she just does it. She just channels my higher self without my knowledge, without my consent, and
Exactly.
the communication. I mean, she should have said like, "Oh, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you communicating yourself, properly with him, or involve me somehow, and then establish some form of
Just
communication,
to
right?"
to I have to
And
interrupt you here, because for the listeners, just because some people may not be familiar with this, but essentially the portal, who is Sunette, this woman, who you can see like with the shaved head in the videos and channeling all sorts of beings or whatever, she would also channel things like people's higher selves, as weird as it sounds. So in a way, not only people who are dead, but also people who are, alive. Like if you're in front of me, you could speak. If let's say me, I were the portal, I would channel the person sitting in front of me, some aspect of themselves, like their higher self, their mind, their whatever you can think of, they can channel pretty much. And so you would talk to yourself through this portal. And
Yeah,
what you are saying is that you were in a relationship with this woman who behind your back, pretty much without your knowing and without
yeah,
your consent, goes to this portal to talk about you, basically, about
yeah,
and channel some aspect of you with in private without you being there.
yeah,
And yeah, go on.
yeah. No, yeah, and that is, I mean, that is such a basic example of where you actually go to the causal factor and the solution to the problem instead of just doing some kind of, you know, thing that, I mean, it's so irresponsible in my opinion, and also so
Right.
counterproductive. And is that supporting someone? Just
Mm-hmm.
discussing in some room about a person that's not even there. Is that really supporting someone? I mean, it's just an example of
It's
how it's
I
used,
find
and
it
also,
disturbing. It reminds me of my experience with TechnoTutor, where I would be in a relationship with a person that we were paired with in the group, and this person would talk without my consent about me and my relationship issues with Avery or Cameron or Katie, who are the owners, leaders of this group. And similarly, they would act as if they were some authority. Maybe they're not the portal, but they would. I call it they had a sort of, members in Destiny overall have a little sort of portal complex. They feel like they can, because of the belief that they hold this special unique knowledge about the mind. It's very easy to go into psychoanalyzing other people and believing that you really see people's like dimensions, signatures, they call it, like their personality, and that you have this unique perspective on how other people's, and like their right to make opinions even on very personal issues about people. But yeah, go on. This just is just
yeah. But
this is the extent
about
of
your
how
story,
how it
this
it,
also
it
extends
yeah.
to you in the sense that they kind of hid behind a being being portaled, trying to
Mm.
silence you guys, right? Getting out of the Destiny cult, as I understood from you.
Yeah, well, this is just a short story I was planning on mentioning at some point, but yeah, just briefly, there was at some point in my involvement, me and my partner in Destiny, we got involved in a sort of Facebook argument with other members of Destiny. And instead of the Sunette actually saying something and clarifying things, uh, she made a recording in the EQAFE library where she channeled some being. I think it was like Vino or some random being from the dimensions. So I think it was a former demon or something like that, who would talk and took my partner's Facebook comment, and she in that recording sort of mocked it a little bit, and said that Destiny is not what my partner was saying. So she was correcting it through that recording, my partner, and having this very condescending tone in that interview. When it's not that it's wrong to correct something that they deem, an incorrect take that we had on Destiny material. But I find it very interesting how she is able, as the portal, Sunette is able to find things on Facebook and make recordings to indirectly, like hit at certain people and indirectly
Yeah.
respond as an authority, and I would say shut down, because she is the ultimate authority. She uses her ultimate authority within the group in that context, but for applying to directly or indirectly toward my partner and me at the time. But
Yeah.
he doesn't do that with everyone, and when it matters, when I ask this portal Sunette to give me more explanations about why, for example, there was a lot of psychological and other forms of like financial abuse within TechnoTutor, she avoided this topic very much, and they try to wash their hands off of the situation with TechnoTutor and what they're doing to people, what I lived, my own story of abuse, being involved with the leaders of TechnoTutor. They why are they not doing recordings about TechnoTutor? Why are they not really addressing this point properly? They're only selective, right, on what kinds of points they address, and others which they don't deem maybe important, even though people are very confused about within the community. They leave it very open to misinterpretation, and if you misinterpret it, it's your fault because
Yeah.
you're not
So
focused on
so
yourself enough. It's the
so
same.
at a moment where someone speaks up, she says through a being hiding behind the being says silence is golden,
Yeah.
right? That is
Yeah,
what she said.
she's telling people in Destiny that they have no. It was yeah,
No,
the
but
interview. It's called something like "Silence is Golden." That's actually the
yeah,
title
yeah,
of the interview. People
yeah,
can look up on EQAFE. But she's telling that to members because at the time, me and my partner, we were in TechnoTutor, and just to give again, there's so much that I can have to tell about my story, but a little bit of context here. At the time, that was in around 2018. The TechnoTutor and Destiny, the core members of the farm, they didn't have a good relationship, so there was a lot of conflict and disagreements between these groups. There was like two factions forming, TechnoTutor and then the core Destiny members. And so at that time, we were part of the TechnoTutor thing, and we started to challenge and like the way that TechnoTutor distributors tend to do. Oh, we have the better version of Destiny, and Destiny should be about this. And then the other faction would say, no, Destiny is about this. And so there was major disagreements about how Destiny should be interpreted and how it should be applied. And that's what you said, Sunette indirectly replies through that interview, telling the members that silence is golden and you don't need to explain. In a way, you don't need to respond to people who are provoking you because we were provoking them, or something along those lines, and
yeah.
that sense.
But
And we were also
that whole
told that
thing.
we were also told by these core members that we were not humble enough, and that we had to write this if we have to write more blogs publicly to demonstrate that we're in the process and that we're humble. And yeah, so that those were sort of, I would say now, the techniques that the group uses when you are in one way or another. I mean, of course, at the time we were still
Yeah,
part of TechnoTutor and the whole thing, but it's one
no,
way
but
of, yeah,
Sheila, I want to kind of relate it also to my story about with the portal, just using my higher self and communicate in some room with something where
yeah,
of my
go on.
knowing, and in that relation is that she has in some shape or form has a relationship with you. She has, Sunette has, not some being or some dimension. So even if let's say, okay, there are beings and they are real, even in
Mm.
that situation, then why would you hide or use that being then to convey that message? Why would you not get the information, get the story, and then discuss it, with someone and not hide behind some being,
Yeah, or just
or
make a
some
statement.
yeah,
Oh, there have been these comments on Facebook that have been made. I just clarification. This is what Destiny, give her own take on the situation. Yeah, but
exactly.
using this being through her, almost a, it's what I remember that that audio had this effect on me, because at the time I still believed in destiny. It's just that I had my own rebelliousness and, challenging them and everything, and challenging their authority. But I still believe in destiny. It's just that within TechnoTutor, another thing is, the leaders of TechnoTutor, they would also hide behind the people like us at the time, where we would challenge or go argue or fight the other faction. But they would all we were in the middle of it. You see, the TechnoTutor people, in some ways, the TechnoTutor leaders would send us as little like argument soldiers to fight the other faction of Destiny, but they wouldn't do it directly themselves, you see.
Yeah,
um
yeah. So what I wanted to say is that so she can just to kind of give some people a little bit more perspective on this portaling thing. She can portal a chair or just channel a chair. Just imagine that she can channel a chair and have a message to the world, right? So you can see how she is filling in a lot of the reasoning and kind of the message, right? Because that message doesn't matter if it's a chair or if it's Kurt Cobain. There's this message, right? And so she is the one that is filling in a lot of these arguments, reasoning. She has a frame of knowledge, frame of understanding, and that is what is being said. So actually, you're listening to Sunette, and Sunette got it from Bernard, and that is simply what you're hearing. You're hearing a message repeating like an old record, which is basically Bernard's ideology, and that's a whole other thing you can analyze on itself. But that's basically what it is. Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say. I do think that some level or another, Sunette, this is from my experience, is somehow avoiding or hiding uh behind something related to the dimensions, in order to not really explain and properly direct the situations that have emerged in Destiny in recent years. Another, for example, person is Desteni. Desteni, the wet, the partner, the wife, or whatever, the one of the founders of Destiny, alongside, the three main people were, I believe, Bernard, Destiny, and Sunette, three main people, founders of Destiny. And, there's the core members. But those three main people, Destiny disappeared entirely. She never gave any explanation. She never came back to address all the mess that emerged after Bernard died, and like the whole TechnoTutor situation and the legal conflict or battle between the factions and all of that. I never heard anything from Destiny to come and clarify. She's, as far as I know, she's alive. She's there, but she never came to clarify any of what she had built in as Destiny. And Sunette, when I requested an explanation from her around the situation with TechnoTutor and what was going on, she scheduled this video call with me, and in the last minute she canceled it, saying that her child had some, like, needed her attention, and she never rescheduled it. And I heard from other people that this situation had been going on for a while, where she kind of schedules things but never really comes to talk with people directly, and there's always a talk around her health issues and whatever. But I remember the one of the last interactions I had with Sunette was where I confronted her and I said to her that, if it was true that they were purposefully avoiding or dismissing, sort of censoring, you could say, the topic of TechnoTutor in the chats, of the Destiny
Avoiding, yeah.
chats, avoiding, censoring, dismissing it, sweeping it under the rug. And she said to me that the people, she made a comment suggesting that the people who were saying these things to me about, because I was not part of those chats, so it was some members who also had left Destiny who told me how they were disappointed at how Sunette and other people managing the Destiny uh, chats were kind of censoring this topic, and not really having an open conversation about the issue with TechnoTutor and the problems that were emerging from this group. And she just said to me something about how she was being personally affected by the gossip, people talking and sort of misrepresenting her, and how she needed to in the future, or she had considered having people sign some sort of legal document before she disclosed information to them. But again, she didn't address the question of, okay, why are you not addressing the point of TechnoTutor? Why are you not going in depth about this? There's a lot of problems with this group, and you're not doing anything serious about this. Again, it's always diverting, either avoiding or diverting it to some point where she's being somehow
hurt or negatively affected.
and that was very much a red flag, because it was one of the only times really that I ever really directly confronted her. Most of my years in Destiny, I was very sheep-like. I never even dared to confront her with things that I saw wrong in the group. But it was just very easily diverted. But again, not addressing the point. Is it true that you are like censoring this topic? Is it true or not? That question wasn't answered, and again just diverted to myself, focus on myself, and something around the gossip hurting her.
Something very unclear, vague, and not directly addressing my question and concern.
There's definitely a lot of questionable things about Bernard Pullman's past that very few, or maybe nobody, of the people who get involved, very passionately in the cult, really question. Maybe only after leaving. Like in my case, I never really did question. Like I said to you, I never really asked, for example, why is Bernard not showing his face in the audios, in the videos? Why is it always Sunette with this whole production, the one doing it, but not Bernard? Why are we not seeing his face, his actions, his body language? It's always just his voice. And
Yeah, not you're not seeing his actions. Also, like
oh yeah,
there's very little actually of his past or what he really tells.
yeah,
It's just
exactly.
very
So
one very
I was
like he leaves out a lot, right? About the
exactly.
context, the context.
There's just so many things about his past, and for me, reading about some of the alleged, I'll call it, claims of his brother Freddie Poolman, who has said that in forums, allegedly, that Bernard Pullman stole the program from him that has now been rebranded as TechnoTutor. So it is very, very questionable. There are many aspects of Bernard's past that I think people, once they are in very pretty much deeply involved in the cult, seem to not want to or think that they are important or relevant. But there's definitely a lot that you can ask and consider whether this was truly a moral person, and who is he to have created all these codes and morality and this whole talk about integrity and values. But how did he live his life? What kind of decisions did he make as a parent, as a spouse, as a brother, um, as a son? We don't know. We don't know who he was.
No, yeah. So, but it checks out. Freddie Pullman created For Blind Mice Studio. He created the software, which is basically an aid for people that have rating of reading. They're not reading up to like the, the standards, and they can use that software to get better at reading. And that is what was developed. And later it was into Readers Are Leaders, integrated as a program, and later that was sold by the different kind of companies that Bernard Pullman founded in 2000. And the secretary Bernard, which was trained in marketing, was the one that created the sales pitch and trained the members of the Destiny members to sell that software. This is what Sunette did. This is what they all did. Was their job. And in the weekends or in between, they would they would do demonology. This is what they did. They would mess with demonology. So that was the group that where this all came from. They did the meditation, all these kind of things, these esoteric things.
You
What they
can
were
find
involved.
some of what you're saying on the Vice article. So I think you're referring to Zena or Zena Swanpole.
Yeah, Swanepoel.
Um,
Yeah. It's a Dutch kind of derivation. Yeah.
just to bring up a quote from the Vice article about Destiny. The formal Destiny cult was still just a vague idea when Swanepoel was hired. It would take a while for Poolman to get his plans in order and try to take over the world, but he was well on his way to developing his techniques. Xena says, opening quote, Bernard could make anyone fall in love with him, Swanepoel said to me over Skype from South Africa. He could knock a person down intellectually within minutes. He could mess with your head. With Xena's help, Poolman combined the language techniques he developed in A Virus-Free Mind, the book we discussed earlier, with the education program he sold in the 90s into a new tutoring software called Power Education by Mind Technology. So it's one of the many companies or rebrandings. Then they set off to sell it across South Africa. We would, in retrospect, as Xena says, we would, in retrospect, manipulate parents into thinking they needed power education. Then we could sell something that was worth 400 Rand, so about $35, for 12,000 Rand, so about $1,000. Then Poolman met a woman named Desteni the Wet, and the two started dating. According to Swanepoel, the Wet took an immediate dislike to her. Swanepoel and Poolman had been very close, and she was making around $5,000 a month. But Swanepoel believes that the Wet convinced Poolman, blah blah blah. To Poolman stopped paying Swanepoel and exiled her to an office in Cape Town. Poolman's education software business started to gain traction in the early 2000s, and it goes on. This is a very good article. Today, we're talking about TechnoTutor. That's the main name that we're dealing with.
Written by River. Maybe you can provide a link.
Yeah, I will.
So so that and besides that, there's like Sunette, who had a very had a lot of traumatic experiences, also with her mother that died, and she was emotionally very struck by that, and she worked she was serving tables, and that's where she met Bernard and Desteni. And they noticed she was sad, and she confided in them, and I guess she really needed as well someone at that moment in her life.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure much about her experience, although the general fact seem to be like what you say, but at least it in some ways resonates with what my experience was with TechnoTutor. I was also in a very vulnerable situation. In some ways, my mother hadn't died at the point, but I was very estranged or emotionally distant, and in some ways abandoned emotionally by my mother. I was in a very vulnerable position, and that's when Avery approaches me the hardest, and convinces me that what I need is TechnoTutor to change my life and to get me out of that state of vulnerability and fragility that I was in. And then I become this sort of marketer, this promoter of the TechnoTutor thing, and I dedicate my life to the promotion of this, and just desperately gave up, or sacrificed my career for my dream of what Avery told me was going to be my life as a TechnoTutor woman, you can say. And one of the things I was surprised about, that Sunette herself started, I didn't know this, but she was a salesperson she was also selling this software, if I'm not mistaken. Is this correct?
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure.
I had
she
no
was
idea
before
she
Desteni.
had been a salesperson.
So this group is like, Desteni, Bernard, some other core members, and they all sell during the week. This is their job. They sell this software. That's what they do. And so this is what their job is. And the common denominator here between what you're telling about your situation and how you got into TechnoTutor and Desteni and Sunette is that when you're in a vulnerable position, it's very easy to be, to be steered by anything. And because when you're at rock bottom, then you're easy to be influenced. And that is kind of what my point
I
was.
was at rock bottom for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's important to realize, and that very traumatic kind of experiences, a lot of emotional turmoil can lead to a kind of things in your mind to detach and to to grow. And if you combine that with psychoactive drugs, then yeah, you have a
Well,
potential for all kinds of things that you have no idea of
what
what
you're
that
getting
actually
into.
is. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's kind of my point, and yeah, that's it. So
Yeah.
I want to work off my list, and then I'm for my points then are done,
Yeah.
because I
Go on.
want to kind of close on the subject of self-forgiveness and
Yeah.
about programmed versus deprogramming. So that's the topics, and so the thing. So change in behavior, not because you forgive what's accepted and allowed, but change in behavior because you understand what is done. You see the cause, you see that it is wrong, you see that it's destructive, unwholesome, whatever you want to call that, you understand it, and that's when you change. You stop, you see it, you get the insight, and you stop, you change your behavior, change your thought, you change your beliefs, and it's done. And instead of forgiving that you've accepted and allowed, like inserting, consciously or not, you change when you see it is wrong. And forgiving what you've accepted and allowed doesn't solve anything. It only programs you to whatever you are talking about, what you're bringing up, as to having accepted and allowed that. So you're actually programming yourself versus deprogramming. So that is, in short, what is happening. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
that
So,
is what I have to say about that.
I mean, you did mention some points in our chat that I would like to read, and you said you made a point about authenticity. You said that authenticity refers I think you were quoting this from something you found on the internet that you liked, and you said
Mhm.
authenticity refers to being genuine, real, and true to oneself. It involves aligning one's thoughts, actions, and values with one's true self rather than conforming to external expectations or social pressures. An authentic person expresses their true feelings, beliefs, and desires without pretense or facade. Authenticity encompasses several key elements, and it goes on. You say self-awareness. Authenticity starts with self-knowledge and a deep understanding of one's values, etc. Consistency. Authenticity involves consistency between one's thoughts, words, and actions. Honesty. Authenticity requires honesty with oneself and others. It entails acknowledging and expressing one's true feelings, thoughts, opinions, even when they may be uncomfortable or unpopular. Individuality. Authenticity embraces uniqueness and originality. Vulnerability. Authenticity often involves being open and vulnerable, allowing oneself to be seen and understood by others. It means being willing to take emotional risks and share genuine experiences, even if it involves potential rejection or judgment. Being authentic is not about being perfect or always having all the answers. It is a continuous process of self-discovery, growth, and learning. By embracing authenticity, individuals can lead more fulfilling lives, build deeper connections with others, and cultivate a stronger sense of self-worth and fulfillment. That's the end of the quote. And you said that this is something that you value, this concept of authenticity. And interestingly
Sure.
enough, self-worth and personal growth comes down to pretty much the opposite of the process of self-forgiveness, of Destiny's self-forgiveness. We're not talking, as we said in our last conversation, about self-forgiveness in, as generally known, but Destiny's version of it, where you basically detached from your true self through imprinting a sense of guilt of what you have accepted and allowed. And where you change your behavior because of accepting what happened and understanding the patterns, and you stop not because you now uh, stop allowing it, which is basically keeping it in a state of resistance, but by realizing and understanding why you did what you did and that we are not some perfect machine that has to be corrected by a human being that has to learn and grow from experience instead of creating preemptive programming to prevent things that you have on retrospect judged to be acceptable or not. And if you did something you regret, you know that, you know what, you don't need to forgive yourself, but you need to change your behavior, and you do not need to reestablish that you have accepted it in order to change or adjust your behavior, because you're not changing it out of a wrongful acceptance, but out of a realization that it is wrong, regardless of it being consciously done or not. So I found this it's a good thing you said in our chats that I took in note. And you mentioned as well here, I can make some points that uh, you mentioned this concept this concept of changing your perception of yourself through this process of self-forgiveness and Desteni process in general, as you reevaluate your life experience and create your own cult identity from that. Okay, so we can end with a little fun exercise. Here, you sent me this thing that I don't know where you found this, somewhere on the internet, but you sent me this, what we called it, cult checklist. And I found it funny to look at and see how similar, how it applies to Desteni. So here are some points. So the first one, read and memorize a number of philosophy quotes or passages, preferably by obscure Eastern and Asian authors. By the way, this is something you didn't write this, right? You found this on the internet?
I found this. Yeah. No, this is not
Oh,
mine.
okay,
This is
okay.
from, I think, I don't know exactly where I found it, but it was a person that was educated in religious studies.
Okay, so somebody wrote this, somebody on the internet will say, wrote this checklist, this cult checklist. Are you in a cult? Or how to form a cult? Let's see. Read and memorize a number of philosophy quotes or passages, preferably by obscure Eastern and Asian authors. Check. Read and memorize a number of psychology and self-help books. Again, the more obscure, the better. Check. I mean, Bernard allegedly has had a set of like Scientology books and the manuals in his library, so that's very telling.
Yeah.
Okay, practice your ability to speak eloquently at length. Learn the tricks of public speaking and debate. Check. Learn how to read people and how to uncover those who are naive, insecure, or emotionally vulnerable. Check. Especially TechnoTutor. In my experience, yeah. Plan out a strategy to begin a movement. Adapt your strategy to meet changes that occur when you run into obstacles or roadblocks.
Yeah, well, a lot of
Uh,
things they have kind of pre-baked answers for, everything is programmed, channels are programmed, so anything that they encounter is basically put aside.
there's always an explanation, right, for everything.
Yeah,
Also
it
for the
basically,
obstacle.
with only the function that it shuts down any kind of inquiry further into it, and that the answer has been satisfied. Basically, that. Yeah.
Clean up your past. Remove or smooth over any past legal problems or inconsistencies which may be unveiled if when your movement or organizations begin to receive media exposure. Very much makes me think of TechnoTutor for sure. And yeah,
Yeah, and
Bernard.
he made a video about his brother using it, like trying to kind of
All right, try
smudge his
to
name. It was clearly meant to kind of take out that kind of credibility from his brother.
the
Yeah.
credibility of his brother. Yeah. Begin to seek out
Adherence.
and followers. Carefully vet them for prior issues and inconsistencies. Remove any followers who are obviously mentally disturbed, criminals, or not motivated. Yeah, pretty much check, especially in my experience with TechnoTutor. Create a core membership from your earliest followers. Separate them socially, psychologically, and emotionally from later supporters. Yep, pretty much checks, Destiny. Advertise your group in a manner that attracts the largest number of potential followers. Make group membership seem to be both exclusive and a privilege. Of course, what is it? The new elite of TechnoTutor is going to be the new elite.
Yeah.
So very special people only join there. Only very special people can join it.
Yeah,
So
or save the world. You know, you need to be a genius to save the world.
Oh yeah, you need to be a genius and rich and special. The new elite. And
If you're so good at math, and you know
the
this,
new
that's statistic. Yeah, sorry.
the neos of the world.
Yeah.
Okay, isolate the members of your group from their normal support networks, family, friends, non-members. At random intervals, ruthlessly purge any members who demonstrate doubt or disloyalty. Create an inner network of informants to show mistrust among your followers and ensure that their loyalty is only to you. Voila, one quote. This is another one. This is a shorter list. It says, steal the teaching of another religion, make a few changes, and then claim that you received it through some sort of revelation. Check.
Mm-hmm.
Announce that this teaching is the only hope for saving the world. Yeah, pretty much. Check. I mean, the only portal, right? Never back down, never reflect, never listen to your conscience. Well, that's general, right? Target people with money, take their money. Target people with time, set them to work as volunteers. Move to America so that you can hide behind religious freedom if you ever get caught out. That one was funny. But yeah, a lot of the center right now, the TechnoTutor thingy they have, their little movement is in the U.S. and it's very tied to their politics, the U.S. politics. So
Yeah.
so that's pretty much it. I think. Yep, I think that for now we can end it here, and we will continue in other conversations and see what other points we can bring up. If there's anything we wanted to add.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna end it here.